What are you doing on a Friday night, Meredith? Oh, nothing. I'm just talking to my fake internet friends about books I've read.
Wherever she goes, I'm gonna chase. You're something out of a dream.
So let's get started. My name is Meredith, but you can call me Mare, and I somehow read 10 books this January, and I thought, you know what? I read 10 books in January. I need to tell everyone about it. So here I am today to tell you all about the 10 books I read in January. Have I mentioned that I read 10 books in January yet? I don't think I have, so let me mention it again. I read 10 books in January. Pretty impressive, right? Anyways, the first book that I finished in January, note how I said that. I did not start it in January. I actually started reading this book on Christmas, but I didn't finish reading it until about a week into January, and that book is Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. This is actually the first time I have ever read Little Women, even though it is a classic, and a classic that is written for children. But yes, this is the first time I've ever read it. I didn't watch any adaptations of the story growing up. I didn't read the book. But in recent years, I did really enjoy the Greta Gerwig version of Little Women, the film with Saoirse Ronan and Florence Pugh and all that jazz. I have watched that movie so many times, so I thought, you know what, I would really like to read the source material for it, and I have a lot of friends who say they read it over and over again every few years, so I was like, you know what, it's time for me to give it a chance, and I have to say, I absolutely loved this book. I was really worried about trying to pick up a classic, even one that was written for children, because I didn't study English in school, and even though I love reading, I've never considered myself someone who like has the capacity to really understand classics and books written in an older language, so I was really worried that I wouldn't get a lot out of it just not being able to understand what was going on. But surprisingly, it was written in very accessible language that I could still understand in today's time. And the characters were so well written and so accessible and real. I'm glad that I waited until I was a young adult to read it, rather than reading it as a kid. I don't think I would have gotten nearly as much out of it as a kid, especially the parts when all of the little women have grown up and they're young adults like me and trying to navigate their semi-adult lives and trying to find their passion and potentially find love. Final thoughts about Little Woman: it's sweet, it's gorgeous, it has really lush descriptions, and I highly recommend reading it if you enjoyed the film or are interested in anything from that time period. So the first book that I read entirely in the month of January, I actually finished. I started reading after starting Little Women, but I finished it before I finished Little Women, and that's because I literally read it in one sitting, probably within like an hour. But it is a horror novella that has a really, really gorgeously creepy cover. So I was very much drawn in by the cover, and it had also been getting a lot of praise on BookTube and things like that, so I thought, why not? Let's give it a try. And anyways, that is Things Have Gotten Worse Since We Last Spoke by Eric LaRosa. This was such a creepy story. I haven't read a lot of horror books. I haven't read a lot of horror short stories. But I thought going into it, I was like, this isn't gonna be that bad. Like, a weird habit that I've gotten into, especially during the last couple years during the pandemic, has been I will watch found flicks reviews of horror movies to fall asleep. Like, that has been very relaxing for me for the past couple years. Like, for some reason, it just being able to hear the plot of a horror movie apparently lulls me to sleep. I don't know what that says about me, but there we go. So I didn't think any of the concepts in this would be that disturbing to me. Oh boy, I was wrong. It's disturbing. So this book is in the form of messages online between two characters. It starts with an advert on an LGBTQ forum where someone is trying to sell like an antique apple peeler that's been in their family for a while because they need extra money. And then someone responds who wants to purchase this apple peeler, and things go on from there when they start continuing to talk to each other and about their lives and become a part of each other's lives. And it's the story of two very disturbed women who find each other and really should not have. It's short, it's not sweet at all, and it really wasn't even that bad until maybe like the last section, and then I was just, I felt gross. Truly disturbed, and I was just really happy that I could immediately dive back into Little Women. It was really well written, very engaging, very interesting, super quick read, and it was disturbing, so there's that. The next book, funny story about this one. So before I renewed my library card, I wanted to make sure that the library had a number of books that I was interested in. So I went on my mom's iPad to her Libby app to look through the catalog of books. So I was going through like the search bar, like going through my Goodreads list, trying to figure out what books I was interested in reading. And they had they had about half the ones I looked up, they had. So I was very excited to see that. But anyways, one of the books I looked up had a very specific title. And when my mom saw that I had searched this book, she sat down with me the next day to make sure that I was doing okay. And the title of that book was Hello, I Want to Die, Please Fix Me. This book is by Anna Mailer Pepperny, and it is a memoir. I think the subheading for this book is Depression in the First Person. My mom was not pleased by my choice of books, but I persisted and I read it, and it was good. Before I talk any more about this book, I just wanted to give a bit of a trigger warning to anyone watching this video. I promise not to go into elaborate detail when talking about any of the intricacies of this book, but if you just don't want to hear anything about this topic at all, just wait until, I don't know which side I'm gonna put it, but wait until the picture of the cover of the book has disappeared from the screen, and at that point I will stop talking about it. But anyways, I will now start reviewing this book. This book is kind of a combination of two books, where it's half memoir and half kind of research paper, where the memoir is about the author's actual experiences with depression and with suicidality, and then the research portion of it is after going through her own personal experiences. She's an investigative reporter, and so she decided she wanted to put in the work and write an entire book about kind of the situation, like the current state of affairs with depression in the US and Canada, because she's Canadian. So the first part of the book is the memoir bit of it, where she talks about her own experiences, and she really uses these unflinching descriptions of her own depression and her experiences with attempting to take her own life and being involuntarily committed. She is incredibly vulnerable about the issues that she's going through. So it won't come as a surprise that the reason I picked up this book was because I have also struggled on and off with my mental health, especially over the past few years. I was hoping that this book would give me some potentially advice for dealing with my own issues, or at the very least the comfort from hearing from someone who was potentially going through a similar situation. And while in some sense it was a relief to read about someone else who was struggling with their mental health and also just really going through it, I will say there were some sections of this book that I found really hard to read. She really doesn't shy away from describing her own experiences vulnerably and honestly, and I really appreciate that. However, the second part of this book is essentially a long-form research paper that really tries to discuss every aspect of depression and suicide in the US and Canada. And by every aspect, I'm talking about therapy, alternative treatments, medications, and the development of them, the way that gender, race, and sexuality intersect with diagnosis and treatment, as well as available systems of support and mental health public policy, and what we need to improve about all of these things. Yes, I had to read off of a list because I had to think of all the things that went on in this book. She really tries to hit the experiences of people dealing with depression from every angle possible. And I can honestly say I definitely learned a lot from this book. If this is a subject you're interested in learning more about, both from the first person and from a research perspective, I do recommend picking up this book. So the next two books I read were in, I think, a planned duology. So I think they're the only books in the series. And I genuinely cannot say enough good things about them. And those books are An Absolutely Remarkable Thing and A Beautifully Foolish Endeavor, both by Hank Green. Now, anyone in the YouTube space is probably familiar with Hank Green or his brother John. Hank and his brother are no stranger to social media and social media fame, using the internet, which is kind of the inspiration behind these books. I have no idea how to describe this book other than the fact that it was really good, really well written, and both books had me up at 3 a.m. crying while I read the ending. So if that doesn't convince you, I don't know what will, but I will try to explain it as best as I can. So the first book starts out with our main character, April May. First of all, incredible name. She finds a giant robot in the middle of New York, which she thinks is an art installation, and so she and her friend, who I think makes videos or has his own YouTube channel or something like that. She and her friend make a video where she's pretending to interview the robot and talk about how cool of like a street art installation it is. Well, after they upload the video, it turns out that this robot is not an art installation. It is actually, potentially, some kind of extraterrestrial object. However, more important than the discovery of extraterrestrial life is April May's discovery of fame and how you can use your platform to unite the world or tear it apart. I think the first book was actually published before like 2020 pandemic, all that jazz, but oh boy, it really hits on a lot of themes that we all experienced and are still experiencing, and it really amazes me that it strikes several chords when it comes to misinformation and fear-mongering and people using their social media platforms to make that worse, as well as the politicization, as well as the politicization, is that the word? The politicization of topics that shouldn't have to be political, like a giant robot or public health. Anyways, as for the writing style, you can definitely tell that both of these books are written by someone who is very much on the internet. It's occasionally kind of jarring to read a sentence that feels like it belongs on like 2014 Tumblr. But that's not to say that this diminishes the quality of the book at all. I truly, truly enjoyed these books. As I mentioned in my spiel earlier about not meeting my reading goals for the past few years, I've had a really hard time reading books that I felt like really sucked me into the narrative, that I just like actually couldn't wait to like open again and go back into. And this definitely did that. Like, I would be thinking about it throughout the day and like looking forward to going back and reading it. Like, that doesn't happen with books a lot anymore. So if that's the kind of book you're looking for, I highly recommend it. So yeah, that was books number 4 and 5. Book number 6 was the second book that I read like in print as a physical book. I don't know if I mentioned, I read Little Women as a physical book. I bought like a nice cloth-bound copy and I brought it back to North Carolina with me, and it's still there because I didn't want to take it back in my suitcase. But anyways, the second physical book that I read in January was The Pisces by Melissa Broder. This book was excellent and well written, but it was also bonkers fucking yonkers. It is a book that came to me at exactly the right time in my life, but it is also a book that I wish I didn't relate to as much. It's about a woman who has just ended a long-term relationship and who is trying to finish her, I believe, PhD thesis, while also trying to reevaluate her life in a way that doesn't center men and love and relationships as much. Big mood. But spoiler alert, she's really bad at not centering men in love and relationships. The cover is not clickbait, my friends. There is a relationship with a fish man. Some call them mermen, but I prefer to say fishman. It was well written, it was thought-provoking, and it's a book that I couldn't forget about, even if I tried. The Pisces by Melissa Broder, book number 6. Book number 7 that I read in January was Harlem Shuffle by Colson Whitehead. This book takes place in the Harlem area of New York, if you couldn't tell by the title, in the 1960s, following a family man and successful furniture entrepreneur, and the ways in which his paths cross with the criminal element of the city, mostly through his troublemaker cousin Freddie. I saw one review that describes this book as a family saga masquerading as a crime novel, and that is such a good description of it. Obviously, I and most other people who picked up this book probably picked it up because of the promise of like a cool heist. And while there are definitely some cool heist elements, it's definitely, more importantly, a really interesting character study of the main character, our furniture guy, Ray Carney, but also a really good character study of Harlem itself. It really does seem in this book that the setting is a character. However, like I said earlier, I was definitely expecting a bit of an Ocean's 11 style heist, and it didn't deliver that level of drama because it was trying to be more realistic. So I can't complain because there was definitely like historical accuracy and a lot of research that it went into it. But for some reason, when I see heist, I'm expecting shenanigans. But this was a really good book and I'm really glad I read it, and I did read it quite fast because I was just really interested in seeing like what was going to happen next. I've actually heard that I think some of the other books by this author are a bit more popular, so I really want to try to get to some of those this year because I really did enjoy his writing style, so I definitely want to check out some of his other novels. The next book I read, number 8, was Less by Andrew Sean Greer. Okay, so I heard a lot of excellent reviews about this book, so I was super excited to read it. It even has that whole like clueless American traveling abroad plotline, which is literally my entire life. So I was like, this is the book for me. It was good. It was alright, but it wasn't like everything I hoped it would be. I thought it was going to be an easy 5 stars. I think I probably gave it about 3.5-ish on Goodreads. So like, again, better than average. It's a better than average book. It was really good, but I really did expect it to speak to me specifically more because, you know, that's what I look for in every book. I want them to speak directly to me. Anyways, this book is about a man who is about to turn 50 and is obviously going through a bit of a midlife crisis. He has given up on love and relationships. His ex-boyfriend is getting married, and I believe he was invited to the wedding. Either that or he just doesn't want to be around at all for it. And so instead of going to the wedding or even just being in town at the time of the wedding, he decides to accept a bunch of invitations to do like classes or like accept awards or to speak at different places like all around the world that he's received invitations to as a writer that he's like always avoided. But this year he's like, no, I'm actually gonna do like a cross globe journey from California to New York to Europe to India to Japan, all the way around. I can't remember all the places that was in it. But yeah, he really does do like an entire global journey to avoid dealing with turning 50 and this wedding. Such a relatable mood. Some of the descriptions in this book were absolutely excellent. I don't have it written down and I really should have, but one quote that I just keep thinking about because it's such a good quote. He kissed like he was just starting to learn a foreign language and only knew second person present tense, only now, only you. How dare you? That's such a good quote. I'm gonna think about that. I didn't even do it justice with my description, but I'm gonna think about that for the rest of my life. It might have just been like writing style. I think the narration was kind of like an omniscient narrator instead of like really feeling like you were in the main character's head. And I think I do struggle a bit more with books like that. It didn't have that bit of oomph that made me like keep wanting to go back and read it, you know? I do recommend it if it sounds interesting to you. It was really well written, as you could tell. Anyways, number 9 that I read in January, potentially might be my favorite book that I read in January. I'm gonna come clean and be honest here. I am 24, last I checked. I'm kind of getting a little bit out of the like young adult fantasy genre. I'm not picking up new young adult fantasy books. I feel like the only ones that I'm continuing to read are ones that I'd either started years ago, or if I'm like really familiar with the author and want to like continue reading that author's stuff, then I'll do it. Even though that was a huge genre for me growing up, I didn't see myself really returning to it. However, I discovered that there was a book written that was YA fantasy that took place on a college campus, except the main characters were still YA age. They were, like, the main character's 16 because she's doing an early college program. And 95% of the reason I picked this book up was because the college that this main character's at is my undergraduate university. This book takes place at UNC Chapel Hill, but I was like, oh my god, like a fantasy novel that takes place at UNC? I have to read it. And I'm so glad I did.
Hello, this is Editing Mare here, and I just realized that when I'm talking about this book, I never said what book it is. So, for your reference, this book is Legendborn by Tracy Deonn. I repeat, this is Legendborn by Tracy Deonn. Thank you for your time.
It's got this kind of almost like Arthurian-based like magic system and like a secret society kind of thing going on, and it is just so good. Like, I didn't know much going into it, so I don't want to spoil anything, but if this book didn't take place at my undergraduate university, what would convince me to read it is if someone said, the characters are good, they're relatable, they're not annoying, and the ending blows your mind. Like, thankfully, I think there's gonna be like a sequel or more books. I'm really, really looking forward to the sequel, but there's just something so satisfying about like a debut, like first novel in a series where the ending to that first book is just like it changes the game. Genuinely cannot wait to see where it goes, and I think this author, what's her name? Tracy Deonn, she's gonna do great things. 5 out of 5. Potentially my favorite book in January. And finally, we've made it. The 10th book, the last book I read in January, is Between Two Kingdoms by Salika Jawad. So in December of last year, the last book I read in 2021 was Wild by Cheryl Strayed. And I really enjoyed reading a memoir. I never thought I was a nonfiction person. I've always identified myself as like a fiction reader. But it's been really nice to read nonfiction memoirs by women who are a bit older than me. I do kind of crave that like older sister place to get advice. And so I feel like reading memoirs of women who have kind of been through it relatively recently and who are like writing these books and giving advice, it's kind of giving me that like older sister vibe that I'm kind of looking for, if that makes any sense. That's my long-winded explanation for why I've been incorporating more memoirs into my reading diet. This book is a memoir that follows the author, Salika, who is in her early 20s, and after getting a job in Paris and starting to fall in love, she is suddenly diagnosed with cancer. She's just gone out and started to be independent in the world, and now she kind of has to be dependent on other people again. The first half of the book is about her going through treatments and going in and out of the hospital and dealing with being immunocompromised from her chemotherapy treatments and waiting for a bone marrow transplant and all of the healing and time that it takes for her to get to a point where she can technically be in remission. And then the second half of the book focuses on who she is and who she has become since being cancer-free and since re-entering the kingdom of the well and kind of leaving the kingdom of the sick, which is what the title is based on. It is a deeply moving and vulnerable story, not only about trying to survive cancer and the treatments that come along with it, but also about grief, death, love, fear, loneliness, and hope. If you're like me and you're looking to add more memoirs to your reading journey, I really can't recommend this book enough. I don't want to say this book is life-changing because I feel like sometimes like saying that about a memoir or a self-help book or something kind of cheapens it, because that's what people say about every book like that to try to advertise it. But I do think that in a small way, it's helped me kind of reframe the way I think about my life and the way that I will continue to think about my life going forward. There are several quotes and concepts that really stood out to me that I am sending to myself on my phone as reminders, because it just really jumped out at me. And so I don't want to say this is a life-changing story, because, you know, a book doesn't change your life, you have to change your life. But I do think it's really made me think more about how I want to live my own life. So in that respect, I think it is kind of life-changing. Despite all that, it's just an incredibly engaging and well-written account of one woman's journey and what it means to be human, both sick and healthy. I think my camera battery is about to mutiny, but anyways, thank you for watching my video. If you are interested in reading any of these books, I'd also like to hear about it, and based on which of these books I enjoyed, if you have any recommendations for me, I would really appreciate it. I really don't know, I don't have anything else to say or promote. But anyways, yeah, it's a Friday night, and I got stuff to do, and by stuff to do, I mean read another book.